Now let's look at next concept in object-oriented programming called inheritance. Inheritance simply means we can create a child class from another class, and this child class can access every attribute and every method in a parent class. So let's understand this with example. This is our old class, which is solar system, and this is our new class, which is planets with water. And you can see how I have written this class. I have written the class name, and in the bracket I have written the parent class name, which is solar system. Now what I am trying to imply, that this child class planets with water can access any attribute or method in this parent class called solar system. And also this child class has its own attribute called inherited attribute. Now let's initialize this child class. Here you can see when I try to initialize it, it gives me an error which is saying missing one required positional argument, which is username. We haven't initialized anything or use init method in our child class. So that means this child class is referring to the init method of its parent class, which is this one. So that's why while initializing the child class, we also need to keep in mind that we need to pass an argument for the init method of its parent class. So let's pass an argument, and now when I run this, you can see though I have initiated the child class, the init method in parent class is called, and it has printed this statement. Now let's try to access attributes and methods in its parent class. You can see you can directly access pww.star, and you can also access this earth method from parent class. Now let's try to access this attribute which is local to this child class, pww.inherited_at. You can see we can access this also. Now let's create an object of parent class with name John. Now here we have created object, and let's try this thing. We will try to access an object of child class from the parent class. So sj.inherited attribute, which we have defined in child class. Here you can see that it is saying solar system object has no attribute called inherited attribute. So what does it mean? That a child class can access every attribute and method from its parent class, but the parent class cannot access anything from its child class. Now let's move to our next topic called polymorphism. Polymorphism simply means having a multiple form. Here in Python classes, we can use polymorphism on the methods of class. In two separate classes, we can use a method with the same name, but each method of them will act on its own. The output of every method will be different, but the method name will be same. So the method with the same name can act differently depending on the scope of their classes. To understand this, let's take two classes. First one, our old class solar system, and if you can see, it has method called earth in it. Is printing some message over here, hello, and then the name of user, and then I am the blue planet. Then we are creating a child class, planets with water, from the solar system. Now if you know, in our solar system, scientists have found 3 planets where the water is present in one or another form. So these 3 planets are Earth, Mars and Neptune. Now inside this child class, I am again defining a method called Earth. But in this method, I am giving a different message. I am saying hello, then the username, and then I have big water bodies. Now let's create an object for solar system with username John. And then let's create an object for planets with water with username Sagar. Here we have created 2 separate objects for each of the class. Now let's try to access Earth method from parent class. And this method is saying, hello John, I am the blue planet. And then let's try to call a method with same name from a child class. It will give me the output which is mentioned in this planets with water class. So here, hello, I have big water bodies. Similarly, we can also call attributes separately from each of the class. Here, if we say sj.planets, it will return us this entire list. And if we call pww.planets, it will return us the list of these 3 planets. I hope you have understood the concept of polymorphism in object-oriented programming. Now next topic in our object-oriented programming list is encapsulation. Encapsulation is one of the fundamental concepts in object-oriented programming. It describes the idea of wrapping a data and the methods that work on data within one unit. This puts restriction on accessing variables and methods directly and can prevent the accidental modification of data. Let me explain this with an example. So here you can see we have created these 2 classes. This is our old class solar system and this is the child class of solar system called planets with water. Now as this is the child class, it can access all the attributes and methods from the parent class, including the attributes in init method. So when I try to create an object with this child class, it will also invoke the init method in parent class. But in this planets with water class, you can see I have created its own init method. So now this planets with water class have its own init method, so that when I try to create an object with planets with water class, it will invoke its own init method rather than invoking the parent's method. So here you can see I have created this variable called self.initiator and it's taking input from the argument of this init, and then it's printing the sentence called planets with water is initiating with modified username. So if I create an object with this class, you can see init method from the child class is running, not from the parent class, because in parent class the init method have this particular line which will get printed if this method run. Now what if I want to run init method from parent class also and I want to run the init method from child class also? So here I am writing solar system dot underscore underscore init underscore underscore and then passing the same arguments which we are receiving from the child class. And now if I create object again, you can see first it's running the init method from parent class and then it's running the init method from child class. Now here if I print this initiator variable with child class object, I will get Mr. Sagar, because as child class has its own init method, it will return us initiator from the child class only and not from the parent class. Since we have explicitly written separate init method for this child class, now it will refer to its own init method only. So this is how encapsulation works. Now let's move to our last but not least topic, which is data abstraction, or we can call data hiding. Let's understand with the example. I have created a class called solar system. In it, I have attributes star and planets as well as underscore underscore age. Now I have already shown you that these attributes are directly accessible when I create the object of the class like this. But when I declare a name of attribute starting with double underscore, the Python takes it as a private attribute for the class. Now what do I mean by private attribute? That if I try to access this attribute outside of class using this object, you can see I got an attribute error. But any method inside the class can access this attribute. Like this earth method can access the attribute underscore underscore age. And if I call this earth method, it will return us this message which consists the value of this attribute. So this attribute is accessible only within the class and not from outside of the class. So I hope you have understood all the main concepts in object-oriented programming and its importance. I will see you in the next lecture. Thank you.